Love is like swallowing hot chocolate. Before it's cooled off, it takes you by surprise at first, but keeps you warm for a long time. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Church online. My name is Jen Mason, and I am one of our worship associates. Unitarian Universalists affirm unconditional universal love as a foundation and grounding for our actions in the world. We strive to be of service to our communities and advocate for change on local, state, national, and international levels. Mahatma Gandhi did it. Mother Teresa did it. Martin Luther King Jr. did it. And we do it. To quote Martin Luther King, love is the greatest force in the universe. It is the heartbeat of the moral cosmos. He who loves is a participant in the being of God. And Gandhi said so much about love. Where there is love, there is life. Nothing is impossible for pure love. Love is the strongest force the world possesses, and yet it is the humblest imaginable. Or, as my husband Steve Mason said 5 years ago, when I presented Augie, our new puppy, this puppy just is love. It can be so painful, even faith-shaking, when our institutions or our leaders fall short of that love, where we reinforce domination, exclusion, or oppression, when we act as a mask instead of a mirror for our freest, fullest selves. To be a faith of action with love as our doctrine doesn't mean we live it perfectly, but it does mean we are called again and again to learn to make amends, to restore relationship, to choose love. So let us sit back and listen to the wisdom provided by Pastor Kris Cervantes as she presents All You Need Is Love.
Good morning. Christian theologian Henry Nouwen wrote, "Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women and others over to our side, but to offer freedom, not disturbed by dividing lines. It is not to lead our neighbor into a corner where there are no alternatives left, but to open a wide spectrum of options for choice and commitment. It is not an educated intimidation with good books, good stories, and good works, but the liberation of fearful hearts so that words can find roots and bear ample fruit. The paradox of hospitality is that it wants to create emptiness, not a fearful emptiness, but a friendly emptiness, where strangers can enter and discover themselves as created free, not a subtle invitation to adopt the lifestyle of the host, but the gift of a chance for the guest to find their own. I echo his words today as I invite you into this open space of Community Unitarian Universalist Church. Welcome to our worship. May you find it spacious and hospitable. Let us lift up that which is worthy together.
We light this chalice today to illuminate our way towards love. Inside the womb of this waiting time, we are bathed in sounds, floating in love, growing out of our comfort zone. We experience love, sorrow, pain, and joy. There is a luminous quickening as we await a new world yet unborn. As Unitarian Universalists, we have diverse spiritualities and inclusive beliefs. We have no shared creed. We think for ourselves and reflect together about important questions such as the existence of a higher power, the meaning of suffering, prayer, and death. We encourage each other to find a spiritual path that gives greater depth, meaning, and purpose to our lives. We impose no dogma, no required set beliefs, doctrines, or unquestionable sources of authority. Though our tradition originated with Christianity and traces its roots back hundreds of years, UU congregations are now intentionally diverse religious communities embracing Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, humanists, freethinkers, atheists, agnostics, pagans, and persons of many other spiritual paths and traditions. We are held together by our common desire to live with greater depth, meaning, and purpose, to grow spiritually, and to learn, serve, and celebrate life together. Please join me in saying our covenant together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
Okay, let's go.
Nothing you can do that can be done.
Nothing you can sing that can be sung.
Nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game.
It's easy.
Yeah, yeah.
There is nothing you can make that can be made.
No one can save the conversation.
Nothing you can do but you can learn how to make it with time.
It's easy. All you need is love.
All you need is love.
All you need is love.
Love is all you need.
Love is all you need.
There's nothing you can know that isn't known.
Nothing you can see that isn't shown.
Nowhere you can be that isn't where you're meant to be.
It's easy. All you need is love.
All you need is love.
All we need is love.
All you need is love.
Love is all you need.
All you all you need.
Love is 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 all you need. Love is all you need.
Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need.
Yes, it's all you need.
Love is all you need.
Love is all you need.
Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need.
Oh, love is all you need.
Love is all we need.
Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need.
Love is all you need.
For today's pastoral prayer, I'll be sharing a poem of Maya Angelou's entitled simply Prayer. I'll be using her words for divinity. I invite you to enjoy them, to dive into them, or to translate them as you find best. Prayer by Maya Angelou. Father, Mother God, thank you for your presence during the hard and mean days, for then we have you to lean upon. Thank you for your presence during the bright and sunny days, for then we can share that which we have with those who have less. And thank you for your presence during the holy days, for then we are able to celebrate you and our families and our friends. For those who have no voice, we ask you to speak. For those who feel unworthy, we ask you to pour your love out in waterfalls of tenderness. For those who live in pain, we ask you to bathe them in the river of your healing. For those who are lonely, we ask you to keep them company. For those who are depressed, we ask you to shower upon them the light of hope. Dear Creator, you, the borderless sea of substance, we ask you to give to all the world that which we need most. Peace. Amen. Our words to ponder today come from author and activist Bell Hooks, All About Love, Love Song to the Nation, published in the year 2000. In everyday life, we are all alike relatively silent about love. Our silence shields us from uncertainty. We want to know love. We are simply afraid the desire to know too much about love will lead us closer and closer to the abyss of lovelessness. While ours is a nation wherein the vast majority of citizens are followers of religious faiths that proclaim the transformative power of love, many people feel that they do not have a clue as to how to love. It is far easier to talk about loss than it is to talk about love. It is easier to articulate the pain of love's absence than it is to describe its presence and meaning in our life. Taught to believe that the mind, not the heart, is the seat of learning, many of us believe that to speak of love with any emotional intensity means we will be perceived as weak and irrational. And it is especially hard to speak of love when what we have to say calls attention to the fact that lovelessness is more common than love, that many of us are not sure what we mean when we talk of love or how to express love. Everyone wants to know more about love. We want to know what it means to love, what we can do in our everyday lives to love and be loved. We want to know how to seduce those among us who remain wedded to lovelessness and open the door to their hearts to let love enter. The strength of our desire does not change the power of our cultural uncertainty. Everywhere we learn that love is important, and yet we are bombarded by its failure. In the realm of the political, among the religious, in our own families, and in our romantic lives, we see little indication that love informs decisions, strengthens our understanding of community, or keeps us together. This bleak picture in no way alters the nature of our longing. We still hope that love will prevail. We still believe in love's promise. Our hope lies in the reality that so many of us continue to believe in love's power. We believe it is important to know love. We believe it's important to search for love's truths. In an overwhelming number of private conversations and public dialogues, I have given and heard testimony about the mounting lovelessness of our culture and the fear it strikes in everyone's heart. This despair about love is coupled with a callous cynicism that frowns upon any suggestion that love is as important as work, as crucial to our survival as a nation as the drive to succeed. Awesomely, our nation, like no other in the world, is a culture driven by the quest to love. It's the theme of our movies, music, and literature, even as it offers so little opportunity for us to understand love's meaning or to know how to realize love in word and deed. Everyone assumes that we will know how to love instinctively. Despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, we still accept that the family is the primary school for love. Those of us who do not learn how to love among family members are expected to experience love in romantic relationships. However, this love often eludes us, and we spend a lifetime undoing the damage caused by cruelty, neglect, and all manner of lovelessness experienced in our families of origin and in relationships where we simply did not know what to do. Only love can heal the wounds of the past. However, the intensity of our woundedness often leads to a closing of the heart, making it impossible for us to give or receive the love that is given to us. To open our hearts more fully to love's power and grace, we must dare to acknowledge how little we know of love in both theory and practice. We must face the confusion and disappointment that much of what we were taught about the nature of love makes no sense when applied to daily life. Understanding all the ways fear stands in the way of our knowing love challenges us. Fearful that believing in love's truths and letting them guide our lives will lead to further betrayal, we hold back from love when our hearts are full of longing. Being loving does not mean we will not be betrayed. Love helps us face betrayal without losing heart, and it renews our spirit so we can love again. No matter how hard or terrible our lot in life, to choose against lovelessness, to choose love, we can listen to the voices of hope that speak to us, that speak to our hearts, the voices of angels. When angels speak of love, they tell us it is only by loving that we enter an earthly paradise. They tell us paradise is our home and love our true destiny. Those words to ponder were very long, and I hope they were worth it to you, because this whole reflection is going to be based on bell hooks. And the title of the reflection is All You Need Is Love. And the answer, of course, is a spoiler, but yes, that's all you need. But I'm not here to convince you. Instead, I'm going to introduce you to author and activist Bell Hooks. Here she is. In October of 2014, Dr. Hooks passed away last year. But who was she? She was born in Hopkinsville, Kentucky as Gloria Jean Watkins. She was raised in segregated schools until high school. Her mother, Rosa Bell, worked as a maid for rich white women, and her father, Viotis, was a janitor. Young Gloria Jean was a reader and a writer, and after high school, she attended first Stanford, then the University of Wisconsin at Madison, completing her bachelor's and master's degrees in English. It was during college that she adopted the name Bell Hooks, adopted from her maternal grandmother, who had a snappy and bold tongue, she says, which she greatly admired. Several years later, Bell Hooks completed her doctorate at UC Santa Cruz, and she has spent her life before and since writing, teaching, and advocating in the fields of feminism, sexuality, political action, racial justice, and much more. She published more than 30 books, including the one we're going to talk about today, all about love. Love Song to the Nation. So in this book, which was published in the year 2000, Hooks spends the introduction and 13 chapters presenting, defining, and refining what she refers to as an ethic of love. This way of being and living relies on the ability to, as she puts it, openly and honestly express care, affection, responsibility, respect, commitment, and trust. Excuse me. She also happened to be a UU friend, Bell Hooks. She spoke at various churches and at our conferences around the country and was especially honored by the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation as a keynote speaker just a few years before her death in 2021. So all her bona fides sound good, but her real qualifications exist in the wisdom and insight of her words. This book, along with Feminism is for Everybody, has deeply informed my understanding of what love is, what love does, and what love means. In her own words, the vast majority of books on the subject of love work hard to avoid giving clear definitions. In the introduction to Diane Ackerman's A Natural History of Love, she declares, love is the great intangible. No definition ever appears in her book that would help anyone trying to learn the art of loving. Yet she is not alone in writing of love in ways that cloud our understanding. When the very meaning of the word is cloaked in mystery, it should not come as a surprise that most people find it hard to define what they mean when they use the word love. Imagine how much easier it would be for us to learn how to love if we began with a shared definition. The word love is most often defined as a noun, yet all the more astute theorists of love acknowledge that we would all love better if we used it as a verb. I spent years searching for a meaningful definition of the word love, she writes, and found one in psychiatrist M. Scott Peck's classic self-help book, The Road Less Traveled, first published in 1978. Echoing the work of Erich Fromm, he defines love as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Explaining further, he continues, love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. Will also implies choice. We do not have to love. We choose to love. Undoubtedly, many of us are more comfortable with the notion that love can mean anything to anybody precisely because when we define it with precision and clarity, it brings us face to face with our lacks, with terrible alienation. The truth is, far too many people in our culture do not know what love is. And this not knowing feels like a terrible secret, a lack that we have to cover up. Now, Hooks wrote all that in 2000, which still feels like yesterday to me, but is somehow more than 20 years ago. Social media and our 45th president have changed the cultural landscape in ways no one could have predicted. But Hooks' terrible alienation has not improved. Add the issues I just mentioned to the existential threat of climate change, and our alienation has only deepened and metastasized. As I said in last week's reflection on violence, we are sick to death of violence. We're dying of the poverty of love. Unitarian Universalists have long been on board with the whole love is a verb thing. We don't always rise to our aspirations, but as a faith movement founded on the doctrine of universal love, we are willing to try again and again. Love demands accountability or responsibility, as Hooks puts it. And so when we falter, when we fail, we are called by love to heed the voices of those who direct us back onto the paths of love and action. Bell Hooks provides one of those voices. And in this book, she provides a basic blueprint for living out an ethic of love based on the values and principles of honesty, respect, commitment, responsibility, and care. Each of these values is explored and in depth and given consideration. But if I went into everything she had to say, I would just read you this whole book. Tempting. And I do highly recommend the book. It's about 250 pages long. It's compulsively readable. And she uses a blend of study, personal experience, and just her own insightful wisdom to make it a very compelling book. Since I can't just read you the whole thing, I want to focus on two sections of the book. One dealing with the necessary value of trust and honesty in fostering and living in love, and the other to do with love in spiritual community and in practice. Of honesty, Hooks writes, "The heart of justice is truth-telling, seeing ourselves and the world the way it is rather than the way we want it to be." She spends much time discussing the ways we lie to others in relationships. Untruths are as an expression of power and dominance, and lying handicaps our attempts to live and act out of love. This is particularly destructive, she says, for men and boys who long for love as strongly as everyone, but are told that love and honesty are soft, i.e., feminine. She writes, "A commonly accepted assumption in patriarchal culture is that love can be present in a situation where one group or individual dominates another. Many people believe men can dominate women and children and yet still be loving. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung insightfully emphasized the truism that where the will to power is paramount, love will be lacking. Talk to any group of women about their relationships with men, no matter their race or class, and you will hear stories about the will to power, about the way men use lying, and that includes withholding information as a way to control and subordinate." She goes on to tell us that when we lie to each other, presenting a false self, the terrible price paid to maintain power over the other is the loss of the capacity to give and receive love. Trust is the foundation of intimacy. When lies erode trust, genuine connection cannot take place. As we think about possibly considering forming the inkling of an idea to have a committee to talk about regathering in our much beloved and much missed church building, as we confront not only a love-impoverished culture, but the unveiling of all old rotten wounds of racism, sexism, patriarchy, and heterosexism, and the ongoing legitimization of white supremacy culture, as we seek out new ways to nourish spirits and work for justice and transform lives, we must think about love. We have to do more than think. We have to do love. To close, I'd like to share Hooks' words on the importance of spirituality, the connection to divine love, as she puts it, in creating and living our ethical lives. These words apply so strongly when I think about what we strive to create here in our community, at Community. Living life in touch with divine spirit lets us see the light of love in all living beings. The culture that is dead to love can only be resurrected by spiritual awakening. On the surface, it appears that our nation has gone so far down the road of secular individualism, worshiping the twin gods of money and power, that there seems to be no place for spiritual life. Yet an overwhelming majority of Americans who express faith in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, or other religious traditions clearly believe that spiritual life is important. The crisis of American life does not seem to be generated by a lack of interest in spirituality. However, this interest is constantly co-opted by the powerful forces of materialism and hedonistic consumerism. Love that phrase. In 1956, psychoanalyst Erich Fromm courageously called attention to the reality that the principle underlying capitalistic society and the principle of love are incompatible. He contended, our society is run by a managerial bureaucracy, by professional politicians. People are motivated by mass suggestion. Their aim is producing more and consuming more as purposes in themselves. We are endlessly bombarded by messages telling us that our every need can be satisfied by material increase. While the zeal to possess intensifies, so does our sense of spiritual emptiness. Our national spiritual hunger, Hooks writes, springs from a keen awareness of the emotional lack in our lives. Going to church or temple has not satisfied this hunger surfacing from deep within our souls. Organized religion often fails to satisfy spiritual hunger because it has accommodated secular demands, interpreting spiritual life in ways that uphold the values of a production-centered commodity culture. And as much as I enjoy popular New Age commentary on love, Hooks writes, I am often struck by the dangerous narcissism fostered by spiritual rhetoric that pays so much attention to individual self-improvement and so little to the practice of love within the context of community. Packaged as a commodity, spirituality becomes no different from an exercise program. Yoga? Anybody? Not that I don't enjoy yoga, I do. She writes finally, author Parker Palmer writes, to be fully alive is to act. Action, like a sacrament, is the visible form of an invisible spirit, an outward manifestation of an inward power. But as we act, we not only express what is in us and help give shape to the world, we also receive what is outside us and reshape our inner selves. As a commitment to a spiritual life requires us to do more than read a good book or go on a restful retreat. It requires conscious practice, a willingness to unite the way we think with the way we act. My friends, human wholeness and thriving are the deepest concern of this church, founded in and powered by and continuing on by love. To love is to integrate the ways we long for love with the ways we enact it in our lives, in romantic and familial relationships, in friendships, in our work and our play, in our consumption and production, and in the compassionate exchanges of what can be called the gift economy, wherein we each share with others as we can. Hooks gives us a blueprint, perhaps a map, a way to walk forward into a future in which we can integrate those things, the ways we want to be with the ways we are in the world, the ways we love with the ways we want to be loved. And with these words, she really helped to answer a question that I thought was already answered. Is love all we need? Yes. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, turn around aunts, people all over the world, brothers, sisters, around the planet. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Come on now.
world. Join hands, start a love train, a love train. People all over the world. Join hands, start a love train, love train.
The next stop that we make will be England. Tell all the folks in Russia, China too. Well, 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 well now, don't you know that it's time to get on board and let this train keep on riding, riding on through.
People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train.
All of your brothers over in Africa, tell all the folks in Egypt and Israel too. Well, 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 well now, please don't miss this train at the station. The station. 'Cause if you miss it, I feel sorry, sorry for you.
People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train.
Once upon a time, most folks used the offering plate to fulfill their pledges of financial support. Nowadays, lots of folks just click on their church websites or set up automatic transfers from their checking accounts. Still, some still write monthly checks. But passing the offering plate was never just a practical exercise. It has always been a ritual. Even if your pledge is paid up, it is worthwhile for you to just give $1 as a ritual reminder of that form of love that we call generosity. Let it be a reminder that after meeting our obligations to ourselves and our households and the communities to which we belong and are committed, we must still keep our capacity to give. The practice of giving, until it is second nature and first response, helps bring forth the realm of love. And how can you give? You can continue to mail your checks to our church's address, or you can set up or continue automatic payments through your bank. Or easiest of all for some, you can go to our website, communityuuchurch.org, and click on the blue Donate Now button. Your gifts are gratefully received. We thank you. As our worship time together draws to a close, it's time now to extinguish our chalice. Please speak the words with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
In 1967, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King stood before the 10th gathering of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and in a speech entitled, "Where do we go from here?" he spoke some of the most powerful words about love that I've ever heard. They bear repeating as many times as we can repeat them to remind ourselves of the power we have and the power we have to give. And so I share with you his words as our benediction today. One of the great problems of history, he said, is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as polar opposites, so that love is identified with a resignation of power, and power with a denial of love. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. With these words, I bid you go in peace, do love, be powerful, give freely, and be safe and healthy. Amen.